Hello music fans, welcome to the Death by Unicorn channel, and welcome to What's New 2023, where I talk about new albums that came out over the past week or so in the metal, prog, and rock music worlds. And today I'm going to talk about 5 albums that came out, and I'll talk about them in my order of preference, starting with Dodheimsgard, also known as DHG, with their album Black Medium Current. This is avant-garde black metal, and it's the 6th album by this Norwegian band. DHG is a great band for fans of other great Norwegian black metal bands like Enslaved and Isan, who also fall into the black metal category but do more adventurous stuff like Dodheimsgard do. And while Isan and Enslaved have more progressive rock influence in their music, DHG has more avant-garde sounds. They have a lot of keyboards and piano in their music. They have classical influences, as well as ambience and clean singing, in addition to the more expected and typical black metal style with shrieking, fast tremolo picking guitar riffs, fast drumming, and an evil and dark atmosphere. I also think fans of the band Xanthocroid will like this, because it has a similarly cinematic and grand feel to it like Xanthocroid has. This is probably my second favorite black metal album of the year so far, right behind Enslaved, though in both cases I think it's hard to just describe those albums as black metal because they're much more innovative than most artists in that genre. I'm not usually the biggest fan of black metal, but when I hear something creative that pushes some boundaries, it makes me interested. So big thanks to the Rhyme Signatures channel for putting this on my radar, because I enjoyed it quite a bit. Secondly, I want to talk about Silver Moth and their album Black Bay. The last album I talked about came out on April 14th, but now the next 4 I'm going to talk about, they came out on April 21st. So this Silver Moth album, it's kind of post-rock, but a little bit of alternative rock influences, and it's kind of doomy. It's the debut album from this project. They're a new 7-piece band. They feature Mogwai's Stuart Brathwaite, and like I said, very atmospheric, doomy, kind of progressive too, very like artsy, alternative, art rock, post-rock type stuff. Hard to describe the sound, kind of unique sounding. It has a 15-minute epic on it called Hello Doom. I guess you could kind of call it a prog epic, but it doesn't have like the fantastical nature of like fantasy and a suite of epic instrumentals, but it's more repetitive and doomy and hypnotic post-rock that kind of takes you into a trance, and it's actually pretty good music to fall asleep to, which I don't mean in an insult. It's actually good for that kind of thing, but it's pretty evil sounding, so if you do fall asleep to this, you might get some nightmares. But it's not harsh. It's not screaming. It's actually kind of beautiful, but dark and sad and doomy. There's male and female vocals on here, I believe, and just really interesting sounding music. And next, I want to talk about the Mars Volta and their album Que Dios te Maldiga mi Corazon, a Spanish title. Hopefully I pronounced that properly. And this is not really a full-length album of new original material. Instead, it's an acoustic album with acoustic renditions of songs from their 2022 self-titled album. So it's kind of like acoustic pop rock, but it's got some progressive and Latin influences. And I really love this band, but their 2022 album was my least favorite of theirs, their self-titled album. And this is just acoustic versions of those songs. Now don't get me wrong, the songwriting and the melodies in particular are great, The Mars Volta's worst album is actually better than a lot of bands' best albums, but I do miss the craziness and the uniqueness of their earlier work, which was much more progressive than this. These songs sound more like typical, straightforward pop rock songs. They have a lot of Latin influence, which is neat if you're into that. So check this out if you're a fan of their self-titled album, The Mars Volta, and want to hear different interpretations of these songs. Next, let's talk about Jethro Tull and their new album, RokFlote. This is progressive rock. It's the 23rd album by this British band. They're well known in the progressive rock world for being the rock band that prominently features flute. And their discography has a wide variety of sounds ranging from folk rock to hard rock to progressive rock to art rock, and even some medieval and classical music influences in there. My favorite 3 albums by them are the 3 in a row of from 1971, 1972, and 1973. They released Aqualung, Thick as a Brick, and A Passion Play, and I don't think they've ever topped those 3, but I did enjoy the Zealot Gene from 2022, but not enough for it to make my top 100 albums of the year. It was kind of a middle of the road album in terms of what I listened to that year, and kind of mid in terms of Jethro Tull's discography. And I like this one as well. This album kind of sounds a lot like the Zealot Gene, but I still think I prefer the Zealot Gene a little bit. The vocals are getting a bit weaker here, but the flute playing and the flute melody writing is as great as ever. So check this out if you're a big fan of Jethro Tull or want to hear some cool rock music with flute. Otherwise, if that doesn't sound appealing to you, you're not missing much by skipping this, so feel free to ignore this recommendation. And lastly, I'm going to talk about Melancholia with HissThroughRottenTeeth. And this is deathcore with some black metal and thrash metal influences. It's another debut album by this Australian band. And I listened to the single called Horror Ethereal. It was one of the most intense and brutal songs I've heard for a while. If you're a fan of bands like Lorna Shore, you'll like this, though it's not quite as good as Lorna Shore. And I checked it out because I'm trying to, check out some cool releases in the deathcore world as well. It's not really my main genre, but it's one that I like to dabble in, and from time to time I find some cool bands playing in that style. So I checked this out on a whim to see, and it was okay, but nothing that I'll go back to really. And that's it for my first impressions on these 5 albums that came out in the past week or so. Hope something here sounded like something you want to listen to, or let me know down in the comments if there's something else that I should check out. And until next time, peace out.